Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. This is an event that I've wanted to speak at for a while, so I took a little speaking hiatus, and now I'm here. So in my day-to-day currently, I work at Igalia, which is an open source consultancy. I'm a product and project manager for the web platform team. And we're the people that you hire to build browser features when the browser companies don't have the time or resources to build the feature you want. And you might be wondering, what is a product person doing up here to talk about design? I've actually had many titles in my career. That's been program manager, product manager, developer advocate, experience designer, all those, but at my core, I am still a web designer. It's how I started my career. And I've spent a lot of time working with developers and building for developers. And I'm incredibly passionate about helping to smooth any friction between the way designers and developers work, which is what I'm going to talk about today. This has actually been a really difficult talk to write, which I find funny because I've written a book on design for developers, so you'd think it'd be really easy to just take from that and come up with a talk, but I didn't want to just regurgitate my book and make this a design 101 talk. I want to provide perhaps like a little bit different perspective on what design can do for you if you're a developer. The other aspect that made this really difficult is when I talk about developers learning about design fundamentals and user experience fundamentals, there's a subset of the design community that hates it. And I have to say, a highlight of my career has been being called names on LinkedIn for wanting to educate developers about design. So obviously, I'm here to keep speaking about it. Because they say that when I talk about democratizing design information, that I am diluting, I am devaluing design. But I don't think that argument really holds up, because wouldn't the inverse also be true? We don't say if designers learn code, we devalue engineering. So I think this rhetoric that gatekeeping design fundamentals somehow equals more value ends up doing more harm than good. And what people actually end up hearing is design is less valuable, and that's not the case. Because design fundamentals are the base, the very basics that experts then layer on top of. And the expert bit is where the real value comes in. And that's not what I'm advocating for developers to learn when I talk about learning design fundamentals. And so my goals for today for developers, I want you to have an understanding of how design and UX can actually help you in your role as an engineer. And then for non-developers, if you're a designer, if you're a PM, hopefully today will help you be a better advocate for developers to be involved in the entire project process, not just when they're coding. And before I dive in, I just want to say it's okay to disagree with me. I'm not here to start a fight between designers and developers. I'm not trying to make things more hostile. I'm not trying to tell you you have to learn design. I just want to share my observations and how I think design and UX can help you grow, especially if you're not a designer. And a couple of the things that I'm going to talk about today may or may not come from actual experiences that I have had in the workplace. So with that, I want to start with an exercise. So I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're in front of your MacBook, you have Figma open, and that you are a designer in a startup. Imagine you have a huge backlog of work. You're working on a 0 to 1 product, so you're building experiences that have never been built before. They're brand new. You're only one of 2 designers in an organization that has multiple products across different platforms, which equates to about 5 different teams that you need to be designing for. You also need to make time to conduct user research on top of all of this. You're also responsible for reviewing design system components before they get shipped. And then on top of all this, you have all these random other requests that come in, like people need a logo or they need a new image format or they need a color. They like all these random things that just randomize you. So how does that make you feel? Stressed? A little bit stressed? You're trying to maintain like work-life balance and you have all that on your plate? So you have all this, and then imagine one day your CEO comes to you and he says, the UI in our product, I just realized has way too much spacing, like we need to rework it. Go look at our competitor for what they're doing, and I need this fixed like yesterday. Again, totally, absolutely not based on a real experience. So you have a couple options on how you can approach this. You stop what you're doing and you completely re-mock up all the different screens with the spacing all adjusted, and you hand that off to your developer. Option B, you could sit with your developer and walk through making updates together. Or C, you can have a really quick sync with your developer, talk about a game plan, and then your developer goes and makes those updates, and then you review it before it goes live. Which option would you prefer? How many would pick A? B? C? So for me, like, it's option C. And this is because ideally you have complete trust that your developer can handle just making some spacing updates. They understand the design language that the company's using, and they know enough to make small adjustments. Unfortunately for our real life designer, that is not what happened. And they did indeed do full mock-ups with adjusted spacing, taking them away from their priorities for the sprint and further delaying many other deliverables. So what's the point of this exercise? Who wants to guess why I'm trying to contextualize this point of view from a designer? Why are these details necessary? What do I want you to feel? Now, if you shout it out and you get it right, you get a book. Who wants to guess? What do I want you to feel? Empathy? Yep. Well done. Yeah, empathy. The point is empathy. We want to place ourselves in our design counterpart's shoes because if we can get a sense of how they feel in that scenario when unexpected tasks pop up, we understand as a developer how we can lighten the load on design, particularly in instances where the changes are just kind of mindless. They don't need a full mock-up. Design is also typically way more understaffed, so it's harder to get time from them to work on all sorts of things. And being able to help them out a little bit in these instances helps to free them up to work on big stuff that will have more impact, like user research, to help ensure that things that you, the developer, is building actually solves a customer problem. Because at the end of the day, we're co-creators of a product. We share ownership of building the same experience. We have the same goals. And so often the narrative about how designers and developers work together stems from the age-old question, should designers code? And I think Brad Frost sums things up really well from the design perspective. Telling web designers they don't need to worry about code is like telling architects they don't need to worry about steel, wood, or physics. Does that mean designers need to know how to implement designs in code? No. Do architects need to be able to lay a block foundation or hang drywall? No. But just as web designers should care about code, web developers should care about design because they have to translate the visuals into code. It's two sides of the same coin. It's not about becoming a good designer, it's about understanding design. We already do the same things for engineering in a sense. We reduce complexity, repetition, and increase facility for long-term and scale. Design does the same. People think I'm advocating for developers to take over design jobs, that developers should now start doing visual design jobs, they should start doing user user experience jobs. I'm not advocating for developers to take over or take anyone's jobs. I want developers to care about what comes before the code and understand the base layer of the systems that are the blueprint for what they're building. So, why should I learn design and UX fundamentals outside of just wanting to be able to learn how to design? What if I told you it's not all about becoming a good designer and it was all about becoming a better coworker and a better engineer? And so, as we've already established, the first reason you should care is empathy. First and foremost, this helps you put you in your customer's shoes, so you understand their point of view when using your product. And then you're also going to have empathy for the rest of your team. When you remove yourself from your silo and ask to be involved, you gain a better understanding of what problems your product manager might be dealing with. You gain a better understanding of what design might be grappling with. And you just overall get a bigger picture that can help determine what technical decisions you need to be making. Because those decisions can absolutely change depending on the audience and the problem that you're trying to solve. So what is empathy? It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy, how do I get that? If you feel like you struggle with empathy, there are lots of things you can do to help develop empathy if you just feel like you're not good at it. It's something that can absolutely be learned. One of the go-to exercises for me to help with building empathy for customers when I'm building a product is to take a few key user journeys for whatever product or experience the team is working on. And I want to imagine the worst case scenario in which one of the users of my product would be trying to navigate the experience. Because if you can build a product that someone who is in a less than ideal emotional state can navigate, then people who are in a normal emotional state should typically be able to navigate without issue. But if you're able to put yourself in their shoes and really feel what they would experience, it's going to help you encounter user flows in a product that are confusing and help to make those smoother. You can also ask to be involved in user research. You can help conduct usability testing. Just interact with the people using your product. Just observing can be really beneficial. And when you're participating in research sessions, pay attention to how expressions change. Does their voice change? Do they hesitate or seem excited when they're talking about your product? Try to just really connect with how they're feeling. Another thing you can do is look at empathy maps, which are tools that help externalize knowledge about users to create a shared understanding of user needs and aid in decision making. So they visualize users' needs, feelings, and behaviors. And you don't have to put this together. If you have a user researcher on your team, just go ask them, hey, do you have any empathy maps available that you can take a look at? And then you can get a sense of what how your customers typically feel and act. And then outside of work, just expand your horizons. Try reading something new that you normally wouldn't. Expand the scope of what, the types of movies you watch. Just try something new. And this is going to put you in a vulnerable position and help you build those empathy muscles. Empathy also gives us the ability to remove our ego and any personal biases from the equation. And this is going to help us truly align on the vision for the best user experience with our design counterpart. Being empathetic has so many benefits. It allows us to build more inclusive experiences. We're going to reduce our internal biases, or we can be more aware of our biases when we're designing or developing. It's going to help us foster innovation because we can actually really think outside the box and get out of ourselves. And it helps us place the customer at the forefront of what we're building versus the business. Which leads me to number 2, which is user centricity. So understanding design and user experience helps center the user in everything we build. Because everything is a part of a system. If we don't care about what gets built underneath everything, we will end up with a mess on the outside, on the front end. And once those messes have been created, they can be impossible or very costly to fix. So what happens when you don't have anyone thinking about your customers or your users? I unfortunately have a very perfect case study that demonstrates what happens in that scenario when you don't think about your users. For this story, I'm going to refer to company A and company B. I was a product manager for a product that was acquired by company A about a year and a half before I joined the company. The user experience on company B's website was super easy. It was really intuitive, really hard to get lost doing what you needed to do. Everything was really seamless, and customers specifically raved about this. You could manage your team and your team access to projects incredibly easy. Everything was really, really good. There were lots of remnants and screenshots and documentation and customer feedback about how easy this all was before I joined. So I was able to piece together a picture of how things were before the acquisition. So they have a great website. Customers are happy. The revenue is rolling in. Got that sweet MRR that everyone on Twitter will not shut up about. It's all good. And then they get acquired. And this is where, from what I can tell, it all went off the rails from a UX and customer centricity standpoint. Instead of letting the tool and site operate as it was and maintain its integrity, kind of like GitHub, like Microsoft was acquired by GitHub, or GitHub was acquired by Microsoft, but it still maintains its own identity and functions well. In our case, company A acquired company B and said, we've acquired this thing. So we need to migrate everyone from the database of the tool we acquired into our database ASAP. That needs to happen. So you need to migrate everyone. And on top of this, you need to maintain the ability to manage the accounts. You need to be able to maintain how people are billed so they can access how they pay for the service. You need to be able to manage team access and be able to add new members to teams. And then generally just maintain the structure of the team feature for a project. And this was key. This was vital because this was the source of the recurring monthly revenue. So the user accounts get migrated to the company A's database. There's lots of privacy and data concerns to consider, but they do that. And then if we go through our checklist of what we need to consider, that's it. That's all that happened. There was focus on getting the user accounts moved over on the back end without accounting for anything else. And it resulted in the biggest user experience mess I've personally ever encountered. And not only as a PM, but a PM with design and user experience background, I felt like this, trying to piece together all the different entry points from company A's website to company B's website, because they didn't actually turn off company B's website. So you could still log in and get to your account that way, but then you would get popped over to company A's website. And then it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And as a customer, it was absolutely noticeable. And the whole mess stemmed from the fact that in the original product from company B, you had this simple idea of teams. And then you had individual accounts within a team, and they all had access to the same team project. And it was migrated into this product of company A that had the idea of organizations. And then within organizations, you had teams and then individuals within each team. However, the existing structure of Company A's feature was never intended for the same use case as Company B's feature. Organizations were an access construct to give people different access to certain parts of a project and different management capabilities within an organization, not relating at all to development, which is what Company B's original intent was. It was to allow engineers to work on these specific technical projects simultaneously with like branching in tools on a per team basis, actively for development. So these are two things that had inherently different goals, different target audiences, way different tasks to accomplish. So at first glance, like a sneaky puzzle piece, the user database was migrated. And yeah, it seemed to fit, but upon further inspection, it really didn't. And the migration caused a huge regression in customer experience that I was now trying to untangle. Our highest paying customers with large teams lost the ability to add new users to their team. They lost the ability to manage their team without having to contact Company A. They could not update their billing automatically and had to be manually billed, which led to a loss of revenue on company side because there wasn't a good way to track it. Like Excel sheets are not great if they're not maintained. And so the ease of use completely vanished from Company B's website. And instead of taking the time to think about how Company B's product and structure would fit into the existing system from both a back-end and front-end perspective, everything was just unceremoniously shoved into Company A's structure. It cost design hours, engineer hours, monthly customer success, and product hours because we had to track who was being billed manually. It cost the customer hours because instead of being able to simply add a new dev to their project, they then had to email us, and then we had to set up a separate billing system for them. And then they ended up having to manage two teams because after all of this, we hadn't actually figured out how to add new devs to a project that had been migrated to Company A's backend. They only thought about the business needs and the business image and nothing else when thinking about migrating the database to Company A. And it left absolute chaos behind the scenes that no one had time to fix. We were in a startup environment. You have 20 priorities that you're trying to get done. No one has time to try and untangle this thing that is clearly going to take multiple months to fix. And I don't think there was a moment where someone stopped to ask what would actually happen if the business requirements were pushed through and what that meant for the customer experience. There was no user centricity. No one thought about what a database migration meant or what migrating teams into organizations meant. And it was costly in more ways than one, because not one person took the time to say, what will this do to our customers? So when you focus on creating smoother experiences for your users or customers, that's going to have a net positive impact on your overall business. You're going to reduce development costs by identifying issues early on before everything else is built. This also means less bug fixing, less stress when fixing an issue. Like, would you rather find a critical issue before or after a product launch? Preferably before, because if it's after, typically serious technical incidents usually require everyone dropping what they're doing to investigate and mitigate any negative customer impact. Second, you're going to have enhanced user satisfaction, which means building a product that people love to use. If people are happy with your product, they're probably going to share it and talk about it without you asking them to. This is something that I experienced with Company B's product that was acquired. Developers loved that application, and it was constantly being shared online as one of, if not the best app for its purpose, without us having to ask people to share. But unfortunately, after the migration, the quality of the experience started to degrade after that acquisition. And that affects not only the customer, but how you feel about what you're working on as a developer or designer. So, third, the team is generally going to be happier and more engaged when you're all aligned on a common goal. I've seen feature requests come down from the top of the chain that are purely business driven, and that really alienates people. If they're suddenly not building something that they feel strongly about or that they feel doesn't actually serve their customer base. I could create a much longer list here, but we would be here for hours. So I really just want to say placing the user or customer at the center of every decision that you make, even if it's on the back end, is going to help you identify major problems ahead of time. You just need to stop and think and just ask, will this or how will this affect my customer? So, number 3, why should I learn designing UX fundamentals? Patterns and reusability. At its most base level, design is purely about relationships, how things fit together, how they relate to each other, whether that's through color, typography, the way you group pages by layout, contrast, sizing. Through all this, you create consistency. It's a tool that creates a system that helps orients users when they're traversing your website or your app. So if I'm on a documentation page, for example, and I'm moving through your docs experience, if the layout of a page suddenly changes and I'm still expecting to be on a documentation page, I'm going to get confused for a moment and have to reorient myself because the pattern has been broken. So consistency is just good user experience. And this is where design systems come in. For developers, hopefully you all know why design systems are great, but in case you don't, these are systems that help reduce duplicating code, can help you ship faster, helps keep pages and websites way more maintainable, and it's a way to unify the company's visual design language. And I strongly believe that as a developer, you should be helping to shape the direction of the library your team is building because you're the one who's going to be taking those components to build your experiences. And as a developer, you're going to bring a much deeper technical understanding to ensure that the components are being built in the correct way for things like accessibility and performance. You should be building out components with semantic code where possible. There's no excuse for a button to be made out of divs in 2024. And yes, this is still a thing that is happening in companies that you would not expect it to be happening in. And it comes down to often no other reason than just a lack of understanding about code. So developers, you can really bring your experience and apply it to design systems in a tangible way. And on top of this, when you understand what a design is trying to achieve, you can make recommendations at the code level in a system or library on how deeply you need to break down components and patterns to have a system that scales and can be of use across multiple teams. You can also ship more code that's going to help you achieve like any defined performance metrics that your team has set with a design system. And who doesn't love more performant code and who doesn't love deleting code? Even AI knows how much you love deleting code. I'm so sorry, I had to. As a developer, you also have the functional and technical knowledge to know when an existing pattern isn't going to work in a context. So for example, let's say your designer is building a new experience on a new platform or outside of the web. They most likely don't have the technical expertise to identify when a pattern or experience needs to break away from what's in the existing library because of technical limitations. I've encountered this when trying to build experiences inside VS Code. Like, obviously, there are limitations. And these are conversations that you want to have before you're too far down a path of building the experience and then have to go back to the drawing board. So you're going to reduce churn and eventually and burnout if you have these conversations ahead of time. So understanding how to identify patterns and where to reuse code is going to make your relationship working with designs and designers more efficient. And in the end, it's going to make your code and design system and the experiences built from that more efficient and more performant. Number 4, this is number 4, but for me, this is probably the most important thing, in my opinion, is common language. Learning design and UX fundamentals gives you a common language with designers. It opens up an avenue of communication because now you're sharing a language and you can understand. And a shared language creates understanding, and then understanding creates empathy, back to number 1. And then empathy helps reduce hostility. I have seen and I have experienced frustration that leads to really, really bad energy between developers and designers. And often it's because there's just been a breakdown in communication. We don't speak the same language. Especially when a design has to change due to technical reasons. Designers, you can't build or you can't design inaccessible experiences and then get defensive when a developer wants to fix that. Like, that's a fair thing for them to want to fix. And on the flip side, developers, I'm pretty sure that designers are not trying to just build or design something that you can't build. Like, that's not their goal. At the end of the day, it's all about improving the experience for the end users and having a shared goal. We have the same goals, and in order to get there, we've got to learn how to communicate with each other. And it goes both ways. Designers should have some understanding of front-end technologies that dictate what you can do on the web. But I'm not asking you to be an engineer, just as I'm not asking engineers to become designers. I'm just asking for enough to meet your developer in the middle and for the developer to meet your designer in the middle and come to a solution. And when you continually do this from a place of empathy, you're not just removing hostility from the situation, you're building trust. And trust is absolutely vital to a good working relationship. Now, what about all these design developer tools that talk about how they're going to fix your problems working with design or working with developers? Aren't they supposed to make communication so much better? Just because you hand me a hammer doesn't mean I know how to use it. I do. I just want to clear that up. I know how to use a hammer. But if you just hand me a tool and just assume I know how to use it, that's not the best assumption. Like, some dialogue still needs to happen. Like, what do you want me to do with this hammer? You can't just hand it to me without saying anything. And there are so many tools being pushed out to help facilitate designer-developer collaboration, and I think that's great. But a tool can only go so far, and you really, really need that shared language to help bridge the gap, because a tool isn't going to fix all of your problems. This was an ad that I got on Twitter for a tool that helps improve designer-developer collaboration. There's a video, but I don't have it on here. But the developer puts a horn in the face of a designer and just like blows the horn. So it's like there's hostility even in advertising. So learning design and UX fundamentals, it gives us a common language that can take our relationship with designers to another level. And it creates a space of shared understanding, which is super important to maintaining good relationships. And last but not least, why should I learn designing UX fundamentals? Number 5, diplomacy. aka career advancement. The best managers that I've had have always been empathetic. And there's the difference between someone who says they're empathetic and someone who actually is. And if you have encountered that, you know through their actions. You can tell. And when you build your skill set to understand how everyone's role benefits the team and you can vocalize this is going to make you a stronger candidate to either lead people or just level up. If you understand the strengths of people you work with, especially as a manager, you'll know how to activate those strengths so that your team can do the best work that they're capable of at an individual level as well. They're advocates. They're able to navigate politics they're able to navigate company politics in a respectful way. And they will truly understand the value of each role in a project, from research to design to development. And this leads to building great products and ensuring things happen at the right phase, as well as making sure the right technical solutions are being implemented, which is so important. So, why should I learn about design and user experience? As we've established, it's not necessarily about being able to design better or at all. It's about expanding our point of view, empathy, user centricity, patterns and reusability, common language, and diplomacy. We dedicate such a significant portion of our lives having to work. It's only natural to want to work with people who not only understand our perspectives, but also care about the way we collaborate. By learning design fundamentals, developers can help bridge the gap between technical and creative and foster a much more cohesive and empathetic work environment. Let's invest in understanding design to enhance not just our projects, but the way that we work together. Thank you.